So this is a special episode. This is part of the new OzonePark chronicles, besides the interviews that I'll be bringing you. So I'm going to give you a couple stories and set a lot of things straight. First, the hoodie merch is in. I don't know how long it's going to last. A lot been sent out already to full-time supporters that I should say have been there since day one. As I showed them, that's the front, that's the back, and that's the patch behind the Hoodie Social Club. The collab came out unbelievable. I will mention who collabed with me on it soon. Right now, we're just getting everything settled. But like I said, almost 70% of it is already gone. For all the supporters that supported the Hoodie platform from day one, didn't abandon when rumors and bullshit and lies started to occur. So, in this show, I want to address something that a lot of people seem to get confused. You know, you hear the regular civilian. I'm a civilian as well. I was never a gangster, never a made guy. I was a street guy. But I was around 4+ decades. You know, almost four decades. So I've seen a lot. I heard a lot. I paid attention. It's all I wanted my life to be when I was younger. So I paid really good attention. And a lot of people say, speaking of John Gotti Sr., where I come from and my neighborhood, regardless that all 5 families resided there, and not just regular made guys, probably nothing under street boss acting under boss or a powerful captain had a social club. It wasn't just any wise guy associate opening up social clubs. You had to get permission in my neighborhood. It was a whole big deal to have a social club. And I got mine. I eventually got mine by 88 Park, around the corner from Fat Andy's house. I eventually took it over and ran it for somebody that was in Nicky Carrazzo's crew. And yeah, it's not, I mean, in today's day and age, it's easy, but it's not. There's a lot of politics behind it. And in a neighborhood like OzonePark, it's not like Bensonhurst and the Bronx and all these other neighborhoods that you hear about, all these avenues, 18th Avenue, Bed Avenue, up in the Bronx, and Pleasant Avenue, and Arthur Avenue, and it's a lot different with 101st Avenue. Very, very different. The politics are different. And I know those other neighborhoods, they have, like, groomed killers and gangsters and big-time drug dealers, but it still wasn't the same. And we'll get into those stories as well, while how OzonePark set itself differently than other neighborhoods that had organized crime. There was nothing like OzonePark in the 80s and early to almost mid-90s. And I'm sure in the 70s as well, a little bit before my time, a lot before my time. So, I'm going to set the record straight. John Gotti Sr. did not ruin Cosa Nostra, okay? There was a lot of guys that were running around before him, claiming to be boss and making the life flamboyant. John Gotti Sr. did not make the life flamboyant. All he did was act like he was. This is who the man was. Now, I heard a lot of tapes, you know, listening to them over the years. Did I ever hear John say, why would I open a legitimate business? What do I want to work a 9 to 5? What did I get my button for? To punch a clock? I don't know if he necessarily said that, but he was a gangster's gangster. And I don't care what anybody says. Where that name rang bells, not in this country, but in every country. And I'm going to get into guys like Crazy Joe Gallo, Joe Valachi. Same thing as Paul Castellano buying a mansion in Staten Island. You know, now I'm not speaking of any of these people in disrespect. I'm not glorifying what these people did. I'm no mentor. I'm nobody to look up to. I'm nobody to idolize. I'm not here claiming this is for the kids, this is for this is for that. I'm claiming who I was. I was a street guy, and I decided to change my life and turn it around. A lot of people will say there's no such thing as walking away from the life I was never made. But yes, I did hang out with, I did break bread with, I was privy to some information that only high-ranking members of the Gambino crime family were able to know. So, as I always say, it can happen any day. But there's one thing that you've always got to remember. Cosa Nostra may fall back for a little while, may change. They're constantly changing how things are. They have to evolve with the times. But it's never dead. It's never going away. They're strong. They're still there. You just don't know, and you just don't hear about them as much. But they're there. And the tough guys are there. And the killers are there. And the earners are there. So when I get these messages from these keyboard tough guys that life is over, then you know what? Get off the internet. All you guys about that the life is over, we're glorifying it, we're rats, we're scumbags. What are you doing on the internet? What are you doing watching these podcasts? These are trolls who probably used to get smacked around for your lunch money. And you want to come on here now and talk like that because 911's your friend. And I understand that. I mean, listen, I just did a 7-minute video on how this wise guy, Hudgy, asks his friend Anthony Gonza to go to the FBI on Gene Barillo. I mean, wow. I mean, that information surfaced. It's like, now, there's no glorifying the life, 100%. That's not why I'm saying it's not dead, because now you have wise guys who call Crime Stoppers, who call the FBI and have people arrested and locked up and taken away from their families and their life, and they're not even committing organized crime acts. But this is the way it goes, and I'll say it today. The FBI will knock down my door tomorrow and put me in jail if they had one thing on me, because it doesn't make a difference. If you're doing these podcasts, they don't want it out there. Regardless if you're trying to help somebody, regardless if you're talking a positive message, they don't even want it spoken about. So anybody that's doing these podcasts got a target on their back. And if they don't, that means that they are really important to the government. I am not one of them. So I know I have a mark on me, as did Gene. But when the whole world is against you and they want to call it karma, it's not karma. You got wise guys calling the FBI or asking people to call the FBI. I happened to get into a car accident. We're coming out of the shopping center, 100 feet away from where I came out of. There was a Suffolk County cop in the parking lot sitting. Right away, I was tested, DWI, DUI. Then they had another guy come. They check your pupils, your hands, your fingers, all types of stuff to tell if you're on opioids or drugs. It's insane that they have this kind of training. They should be focusing on hand-to-hand combat training more, but they got the drug thing down. And if I was on drugs or if I was on alcohol, I wouldn't be here right now doing this video. So if anybody wants to know about that, my friend who was a captain in the Gambino family, who they are actually considering taking off the shelf right now, had his cousin call up a site and put those pictures up. When his cousin seen me in that neighborhood, he was talking to me like we were acquaintances. Hey, Hootie, don't worry about it. You're all right. Stay in the car. They were saying I couldn't get out of the car. They were telling me to stay in the car. I was telling them I'm fine. I was 100 feet away. I wasn't going more than 20 miles an hour. It was a curb. These guys turned it into such a big thing. This is what Cosa Nostra is today. This is what I'm trying to explain to you with this story. wise guys and gangsters and people that want to call themselves skippers and people that are being taken off shelves, they go to other people and have them call the FBI. They have them post pictures on a website. And then I call it smear campaigns. They smear your name all over the place. Drugs and alcohol. This is what Cosa Nostra is today. This isn't me explaining my situation. This is me explaining Cosa Nostra today. For people who think it's dead, it's not. That's what it is today. Just as when Gene was on the streets, they were calling Crime Stoppers on him. Street guys. Probably even wise guys. But this time around, getting the information that I got, legally, this guy had a wise guy go to his friend and have him go to the FBI and have this man violated and taken away from his family and thrown in a hole and then into population. And you know what? If he wasn't a stand-up guy and if guys didn't look at him in a certain way, he could have got hurt or he could have got killed. But he was a stand-up guy and guys knew that and he could hold his own and he was in Gen Pop and that's exactly what he did. But as he is now on home confinement and I can't have any interactions with him or speak to him or anything like that, that's the same thing they could have did from the beginning. There was no need to put them in jail. He's done with organized crime. We all are. No one's out there committing crimes. Everybody's trying to do this. I mean, let me speak to everybody. The people that were in this podcasting circle are out trying to do this and better themselves and hopefully find their lane. Me? I know I can't go out and take a piece of bubble gum because they'll put me under the jail. I know what's awaiting me. And for those of you that don't want to believe it or hear it, you can go to any website. You go pay and get my indictments. There's many of them. And none of them warrant organized crime, RICO, or enterprise corruption. So that's what ruined the life. Not John Gotti Sr. making the front page. Joe Gallo made the front page. Frank Costello made the front page. Joe Colombo, namesake of a crime family. Namesake of a crime family. John Gotti wasn't the namesake of a crime family. Joe Colombo was. Started this whole movement that brought so much attention to Cosa Nostra over his son being mistreated by the NYPD or the FBI. Whoever it was that he was involved with law enforcement in a certain situation. Listen, don't get me wrong, the Italian-American Society still exists to this day, but it's a lot different. I've actually seen it. I've went to some of their meetings. There's a place on Queens Boulevard in Queens that they hold office at. But all of these guys, Joe Valachi, live TV for everybody to see, explained a ceremony of being straightened out with the 5 families. They almost considered him a boss at one time. Okay? Lucky Luciano, campaign of putting Vito Genovese in jail for drug trafficking, cocaine trafficking. This life was doomed 50, 60, 70 years ago. Okay? Sonny Francis was one of the most powerful man's men, tough guy, gangster's gangster. Words that actually came out of John Sr.'s mouth. Said things and traveled around with 20 guys at a time. All of this stuff was being noted. Carmine Persico, the snake, represented himself in the early 80s on the commission case. One, the commission should have ruled against that because he was a boss, but he wanted to make it seem like Ralphie Scopo Sr. was the boss at the time, and not saying so, but in his arguments as representing himself as a lawyer, we turned around and got Ralphie Scopo Sr., who was supposedly the boss of the Colombo family at the time, during the Windows case, commission case, 100 years, and Carmine Persico wound up getting himself 100 years. Tony Salerno, boss of the Genovese family, right? What did he do? He held court in Harlem. Going to his social club. He would sit there, and all the old people and the old timers would come down to his social club, and talk to Tony Salerno about what was going on in the neighborhood. Oh, we need to fix this, Mr. Tony. We need to fix that. The guys are playing loud music in front of my house. See, there's a lot of things that you don't know that go on in small Italian neighborhoods like this. It went on in Ozone Park. My mother was one of them. Guys hanging out on the corner too late, seeing a guy smoking a joint. See, that stuff didn't go on in Ozone Park. I hear these stories about guys lighting joints up and smoking in their neighborhoods. I know when the Gotti regime was in power, you couldn't even smoke weed in Ozone Park or Howard Beach. They would go on a tyrant with 20 guys driving around from park to park, beating up kids over marijuana, selling, smoking. So yeah, so and then look, Don Carlo, the quietest of them all. The only luxury that man had was his license plate. He had a customized license plate that said Gambino on the back. Now, he's Don Carlo. He was a down low guy, but that's the crime family's name, okay? And then in his later years, towards his retirement before his death in 1976, every day he'd have his driver drive him from Ocean Parkway to Ferrara Brothers in Little Italy. And he would sit in Ferrara Brothers. He wouldn't go to O'Neill's Club or any other of the clubs in Little Italy. He would sit in Ferrara Brothers and he would hold court, but not with wise guys, with people in the neighborhood. You know, they kind of used the forensic, they used the situation in The Godfather. Because that's what Don Carlo was doing at the time with the lady who wanted to keep the dog, and the guy comes down and he didn't realize who he was talking to, and, you know, and then he's Don Corleone, the rent stays the same, then he arrested, then the dog stays, and he'll stay up in the Bronx with his sister. That was Don Carlo. They got that from how guys like Tony Salerno, Don Carlo, would sit around and hold court, not for wise guys, for the people of the neighborhood. And they would come to him with little problems, you know, but to feel good that they were able to get it done, that somebody was listening, that somebody was protecting the neighborhood. I don't go online and look a lot, but I seen a meme, and they put up a picture of the Gotti regime, and it was Gotti and a few other guys. And this was an ordinary person. And you know what they wrote? When these guys were around, the city was a safer place. Those are civilians writing that. You know, and I'll get into when John Gotti was going to trial and civilians had banners hanging out of their windows, and merchants on the stores used to have a banner. It was in the Daily News. I have the picture somewhere. It made like the front page of the Daily News, and it said, "Good luck, John," from all the merchants on 101st Avenue. And this was on my end of 101st Avenue. They were on the other end of Woodhaven Boulevard, but they all represented for John Sr. and wanted to see him, you know, beat the trial. No one wanted to see him go. I could tell you today, if John Sr. goes to trial, he's found not guilty. No matter whose testimony, no matter what the tapes say, today's people will not, today's person, the way people are today, will not put John Sr. in jail. It would never happen. So, people need to stop saying John Gotti Sr. ruined them out. Don't you think John... Like, that's like so many questions I get when people find out where I came from, where I hung out, who I broke bread with. Don't you think John Sr. ruined the mafia? Al Capone walked around in the same... Al Capone made what? Back then, $100 million a year, they were saying? Did you see the cars and the houses that he drove? You know, or he lived in? He owned houses everywhere. Everywhere. He wore suits that were just expensive, maybe probably more than what John Sr. wore. John Sr. lived in a modest home. Al Capone lived on a compound, and they were only able to get him for tax evasion. And how they got that to stick, I couldn't tell you. Just from papers that were handwritten. Nothing, that I guess that's a paper trail for those days. I don't know. And you know what? It's all legal today. That's the scary part. It's all legal today. But what about him? Right? They use bombs. Cosa Nostra doesn't believe in bombs. They killed everybody. They had mayors. They had... And then what trickled down from Capone in the 20s was everything else in the Midwest, from St. Louis to Detroit to Cleveland. That all trickled down from the Midwest. That was all Capone. And anything that went out west was Capone's era. And Capone was never even a made guy. Never even had a ceremony. I'm going to give you the guy's name who saved his life in a Coney Island bar, where he got his nickname, Scarface. And they sent him to be Johnny Torrio's driver. And after so many attempts on Johnny Torrio's life, he just retired after he was shot really bad. And they weren't, Cosa Nostra in New York City wasn't going to send anybody down to Chicago because they had no idea what Johnny Torrio was doing. I mean, he reported back he was part of the commission, but they didn't want anything to do with it. And Al Capone took it over on his own with shrewdness and killing ability and straight toughness, and ran around and was in the newspapers every day. And you know what? The media wasn't as good as it was when John Gotti was going to trial in Capone's days, or it would have been worse. So let's figure this out, right? Carmine, the snake, in the early 80s, representing himself at trial. Some say having a lot to do with getting Ralph Scopo. Also, the 100-year sentence, because he was claiming he wasn't boss at the time. He wound up getting himself the 100 years as well. Tony Salerno holding court in Harlem. Don Carlo holding court in Ferrara Brothers. Crazy Joe Gallo running around calling himself boss when nobody officially called him a boss on the commission. But was he a boss in his own right? Probably. He had the balls, he had the brains. But this guy was hanging out with movie stars. He was consulting for movie stars. Okay? And that, you don't think, brought attention? Bugsy Siegel wanted to become an actor. He was known. This guy had one of them highest murder rates and was probably responsible for forming Murder Incorporated. Goes out to California and all of a sudden wants to be an actor. One of his childhood friends and close friends was a big-time actor back then. And this is what he wanted to do, you know? And he was in the newspaper all the time. Building that casino was huge news. But this is what shaped Cosa Nostra. This is what Cosa Nostra was. Now, if you ask me, when a guy like Vincent the Chin Gigante turns around and wants to order hits on John Gotti and the Genovese family is the most powerful family, this guy, anybody that checks themselves into an institute, number one rule, they can never get straightened out. They'd be thrown out of Cosa Nostra. That's a no-no. That's a big no-no. This man was evaluated more than one time in the crazy house. But that was accepted because the Genovese family was a powerhouse at the time. Powerhouse. But you don't think that drew attention? I used to run into guys, and in the underworld, that was an embarrassment. They said, look how at least John Gotti was upfront about who he was. Don't you think that ruined Cosa Nostra? A guy that controls the most powerful family probably in the world at the time is walking around in his bathrobe and rips up slippers and pajamas. And you know what? That made me think. I was young at the time when that was told to me by an older African-American gentleman that I got along with very well. He was facing a double life sentence, double homicide. He got caught with the shotgun sleeve on his shoulder, but they never found the shotgun. I'll get into those stories as well when we get into the jail stories. But, all of these people use John Sr.'s name as who ruined Cosa Nostra. Cosa Nostra ruined Cosa Nostra. All good things come to an end, right? The old saying, I don't like metaphors and sayings, but it was inevitable. It was going to happen. Joe Valachi, Vito Genovese, Crazy Joe Gallo, Sonny Francis walking everywhere with 20, 30 guys. Everywhere he went, he was a movie star. He was a movie star. He had movie star looks. He wasn't built like a regular Italian. He was built like a tank. He stood over 6 feet tall. Women loved him. So, where we start to say who ruined Cosa Nostra, it comes way before and way after John Sr. To me, this is who you are. Now, you want to avoid being prosecuted. Joe Bonanno went on the lam, right? Not to be, even though, let's get into that. He goes on 60 Minutes. He writes a book. He holds court when he shouldn't be holding court at his house in Arizona, which was bugged. That meeting should have never taken place. It shouldn't even have been approved by the then acting boss of the Bonanno family. And that name should have been struck in a long time ago, but then Joe Messina went bad. Because that was gonna be the whole change of the commission if the Vicarina side would have won the Colombo War and John Cena needed the votes to become capo de tutti capo because he wasn't considered capo de tutti capo, which was to be the boss of all bosses. He was only considered the boss of the Gambino family. And his next step was to become capo de tutti capo. And he needed the votes, which he would have got if the Colombos win the war and Joe Messina was a friend of the Gambinos. I know you hear the story about Joe Messina lending out Tommy Karate to do the Willie Boy hit. Whatever. John lived on one block. Joe lived on another. Like I told you, the neighborhood, my neighborhood, all powerhouses. All powerhouses, not just regular made guys. I call them glorified associates, to be honest with you. Half of them, they just got made because there was nothing else to do with them, and they weren't killing people anymore. Because years ago, there used to be a saying, you either whack them or you make them. But those days are over. So, look at all of these things. And all we look at is tunnel vision. John Gotti Sr. ruined Cosa Nostra. No, he didn't ruin Cosa Nostra. He made Cosa Nostra look good. Respectable. When people put up pictures and talk good about Cosa Nostra, they put up John Sr. Because now I realize, when you guys say he flooded this neighborhood with dope, he was a dope dealer. No, he wasn't. The man hated money. If you know anything about John Sr., he hated money. He hated anything to do with money. He couldn't wait to get rid of it. He gambled his face off. He said it all the time. Money was the root to all evil, just as women are. Just get rid of it. And no, when he was around, there wasn't even marriage. Yes, don't get me wrong. The after hours, you go to a guy's house, you beep a guy, you meet a guy in Woodhaven or Richmond Hill, you get a little something. But there was no heroin. There was no heroin in that part of Queens. Pot was a big deal to come by. Mescaline was a big deal to come by. Cocaine, even if you were a made guy, or if you got high, was very, very on the down low to get. No, they didn't flood their neighborhoods with drugs. No, they didn't ruin their communities. No, they didn't shake down their own people or extort other Italians and Sicilians and anything that has to do with the Italian race. No, none of that happened, okay? Anytime a picture's brought up, it's John Sr.'s picture. He kept the neighborhoods right. He kept the people in the neighborhood happy. Just go back and look at old cuts of his funeral. I was there. I was in one of the cuts. There was neighborhood civilians out there on the streets saying goodbye to this man. Civilians that rooted for him, that knew the neighborhood was going to fall apart without him. And it did. It did. OzonePark collapsed. You can't even find probably an Italian resident in OzonePark anymore. It's all Middle Eastern now. Which, nothing wrong with that, but these were our neighborhoods. And now they're flooded. Howard Beach, flooded with heroin. Something I thought would never be said in OzonePark, Woodhaven, Richmond Hill, South OzonePark, Howard Beach would be the word heroin. Now, I heard that it's young kids and teenagers getting high. I drive through it once a week. I'm going there today. And it's desolate. Nobody in the parks playing ball. The young kids used to hang out on the corners at night, inside the park, with their girls. Gone. So this is it. They're all shooting dope, heroin, opioids, pills, whatever. It went to shit. Now, would it have happened if he was still here? I don't know. But if it kept up the way it was, maybe. Now, like I said, I'm not glorifying life and say that the life should still be here because, believe me, the FBI be kicking down the door. But what I'm saying is, when we look at who ruined Cosa Nostra, if we want to talk about that subject, there was many other people before him, after him, and during him that were ruining it. It was just that one little time period between 89 and 91 that you just want to talk about how he ruined the life. He didn't. He didn't. He was who he was. That's it. What did he do? He got caught talking on tape that was being recorded in an old woman's apartment. Who would ever think that was possible? Did he ever think that he was being recorded? No. But then look at the chin. He got talked straightening up like Cosa say at the end of the movie, walking straight. And that's how they got him eventually. So regardless if they got John, he was named boss in what, 85? Let's say 86 because Paul gets clipped in 85. It's Christmas. They probably don't name a boss or a successor until 86. So from 86 to what, 2 years? And they nabbed him, I think on the next pinch was 88, 89. So what makes it different if they got him then, and then the chin takes over, the Genovese family, and starts walking around in a robe, embarrassing all of the underworld. Listen to me, I've been in the jails. I've seen how other ethnic gangs talk, other groups, other crime families, people in other countries, people in other states, and they talk about John Gotti, their chin. Isn't that an embarrassment to Cosa Nostra? And the number one rule, if a guy checks in, and there's guys right now that are telling you stories that they weren't even a part of, but they swear they were, that checked in as well. Believe me, there's a few guys out there that want to throw stones, and they've checked into a few loony bins themselves. And this guy's checked into them. Some were mandated. But if you're walking around in a bathrobe, what are they locking you up for? Who's talking and who's saying things that you're so worried about being locked up? John Gotti was out there talking on tape. Meetings, got walk talks. I mean, there's 1,000 pictures on how many walk talks he had, right? Listen to me. Was he part of Cosa Nostra's downfall? I'm sure. Was it as big as what everybody says? No. Because there's other people that made it worse. And like I said, let's go back to the commission case. A lot of guys in that case made it worse. Carmine the Snake being one of the biggest. Go back and read those minutes. Then you got Crazy Joe Gallo, calling himself a boss when no one named him boss, but was a boss in his own right. But he wasn't named boss. Joe Colombo. Are you kidding me? What he did, what he went on TV, you're holding press conferences, and you're the boss of a crime family? No. That is what kills Cosa Nostra. But it's the inevitable. It was going to go away anyway. We're fighting the toughest gang in the world, the United States government. You're not beating them, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you got. When I get into more stories and I tell you about the brothers, the Lord of War, and how much money they offered the government, because they were locked up with us as well when we had got pinched. One of them got moved to MDC at the time. And I think only another one spent a little time at MCC. But we crossed paths. And those guys, they had $500 million like this to give the government and walk out the door. And I'll tell that story one day. Don't make a difference. Look, Bernie Madoff. I mean, let's just talk about it. The money. You can't beat them. You can't beat them. You're going to have all the money in the world or no money. It's the same thing they're going to do to you. If they want you, they want you. That's it. End of the line. And then you got wise guys, like I just said, turning around and cooperating behind the scenes with the FBI to put other guys in jail because they're scared of them. Scared of what? Guy changes his life. Guys want to become an actor. Guys writing screenplays. The guy's producing shows behind the scene, and you want to put him in jail for what? It's bitterness. But that's the way Cosa Nostra got ruined and turned out today. It wasn't because of John Sr. So with the DMs and the messages, they got to stop. John Sr. didn't ruin Cosa Nostra. There's 100 guys before him, during him, and after him that made it a lot worse than he did. You just don't realize it. How many people were in the newspaper? This guy walking around in a bathrobe made the front page of every newspaper almost once a week. That's an embarrassment to the underworld. That makes us look bad when we go into prisons, when we go into meetings with other, because eventually you're going to have to do business with other ethnic backgrounds, right? the Asians, the blacks, the Spanish, the Albanians. That looks bad. That looks bad. He could have just dressed like a regular person and went on about his life, because you know what? Eventually they got him. So what was that whole scene for? I mean, he should have been bumped from boss. His first sit down with a psych or checking into a psych ward, because I know they actually held him for like 72 hours once. He should have been knocked down from boss right away. And he wants to go after John Gotti for an unsanctioned commission hit. How did the other families? Well, jealousy. They probably didn't like John. John was good looking. John was charismatic. And you know what? John had the people behind him. The jurors didn't agree. I don't know where they got them jurors from, but he had the people behind him. You don't find that amongst other wise guys. You don't. Like, I mean, in the old days, you know, Fat Tony Salerno, Don Carlo, everybody loved them. Like I said, towards the end of their lives, they held court in their social clubs, Don Carlo and Ferraro's Bakery. But, like, the Chin checked himself in, and he was the thriving force, driving that nail in the coffin for John Sr. to get killed. I don't know. Was it luck? Because they eventually got John Sr. and put him away. It's a shame. The Chico and the Chico family is a very well-known family in the streets, and the Gambino family, powerful, tough guys, smart, and that should have never happened. Who is the Chin to order something like that? And with this lunatic maniac gas pipe. That guy was half in the bag. But he wasn't running around in a bathrobe claiming to be something else. And we sit here and I listen to people blame John Sr. Cosa Nostra was ruined before John Sr. was boss, while he was boss, and after he was boss. Crazy Joe Gallo, was walking around with 4 or 5 bodyguards, wearing dark suits and dark sunglasses. Another guy testified in front of Congress or the grand jury live. Joe Valachi on TV, talking about the saint burning in his hand. Stories that I've heard many times from friends of mine after they walked out of rooms of being straightened out. That right there, what does John Gotti Sr. have to do with ruin Cosa Nostra when you got a man 40 years before, 30 years before him, actually talking about a ceremony? The real ceremony, exactly how it happens. Word for word, step for step. Let's stop blaming John Sr. for ruining Cosa Nostra. They all did. Big Paul living in a mansion they used to call the White House. Toad Hill. Who could afford to live in Toad Hill? Bankers. Finance guys. Right? I know he had legitimate businesses, and to this day his family still run, but that's not the way you live. Right? You live in a modest... Don Carlo lived in a modest home. Right? Off of Ocean Parkway, right? Modest home. The license plate, I mean, if it wasn't the namesake of the family, I'd say, yeah, okay. But it was the namesake of the family. John lived in a modest home, drove a modest car, drove a Lincoln Town Car up until he became boss. And if you listen to my other stories, you would have heard Joe Watt's story about that. Modest, but he liked to look good. He liked to be clean and fresh and get his hair cut every day and his nose hairs trimmed. Yeah, he did. He had a barber seat. I used to break his younger son's chops all the time about that barber chair. After he had passed, I wanted the barber chair. He had a barber chair in the middle of his club, and Vito from Vito's Hair Salon on 101st Avenue would come every day and clean him up. Guy liked to be clean and fresh. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that he ruined Cosa Nostra. Walking around in a bathrobe, this is the underworld. We got to worry about what our enemies and our friends who become our enemies think. Forget about anything else. And they see this guy walking around in a bathrobe, acting like that, drooling on himself, checking himself into mental hospitals. That doesn't look good for organized crime. We can't hold weight in jail when they look at us like that. Those are the things we got to worry about. Forget about the newspapers and the social media. Worry about walking in jail and having a little bit, enough respect where, yeah, you're going to have to fight. Everybody's going to have to fight in jail. You have. If you don't, I don't believe your story. But that gives you a little bit of a leeway if they know that you come from an organized crime family or this is what you're a part of. But not if you're a part of that. That's an embarrassment in the underworld. And I've heard it over 24 times from different people in the underworld. That was an embarrassment. That ruined Cosa Nostra, not John Sr. Did it add to it? Absolutely. And that's my story for today, guys. Stop assuming because they gave him these names and they put him on the front page of the Daily News. Before his time, they did the same thing to Joe Gallo, Paul Castellano, all of these guys. Sonny Francis was in the newspaper all the time. Great guy. Gangster's gangster. John Senior's actually said it many a times. But he walked around with 20 guys like a movie star. He was a rock star of a gangster. You know what I mean? The guy put his hand on the phone book and he was having to sit down. The guy was recording it and he put his hand on the phone book and they were trying to figure out who was with who. And he got caught saying on tape with his hand, he grabbed the phone book out of the telephone booth and put his hand on the phone book. He goes, we'll make this nice and simple. Everybody in this phone book's with me. One, that's power. Two, that's so charismatic as a wise guy. And that's just telling the guy, I don't give a fuck who you talk to, who do you think's with you. Everybody on Long Island, from Nassau County to the tip of Montauk is with me. That's exactly what that was saying. Okay, so these are the guys that added to Cosa Nostra being a downfall. It's going to happen either way. All right, so they got John in 91, right? They convicted him, put him away, did unthinkable things to him. And that's not the government. That's actually they're government employees, but that's the Bureau of Prisons. It's two separate. Because I can tell you firsthand, when the FBI hands you off to the marshals and the FBI don't like each other. It ain't the FBI who did that. You want to say the United States government? That's the Bureau of Prisons that did that. Okay? Part of the government as well, but not the FBI. The FBI does their job. They lock you up. They bring you in for the prosecution. The U.S. Attorney's Office, they prosecute you. They put you away. Then the marshals and the Bureau of Prisons, they do that to you. Okay? Not the FBI. They do that to you. Now, do the FBI hold grudges and hold a stick for you where other law enforcement agencies, when you get pinched in the state, you get locked up, they put you in jail, you go to jail. If you ever get to come home, they throw you in a pool called probation, and that's a trap for you to get arrested again, and you're somebody else's case and you're somebody else's problem. Where the FBI, they have certain people that work that certain crime family, and they don't believe in rehabilitation, so they're going to constantly look at you and constantly take you. And that's it, bottom line. And that's this week's story. All right? Cosa Nostra's downfall wasn't John Gotti Sr. There was a lot of moving parts that had to do with that. And look in the end. John stood up like a man's man and went out like a real G. The Chin went out in a bathrobe and pajamas. And on his record, more than one stay at a mental institution. Which I know for a fact there's a few guys that didn't get straightened out in the Gambino family because of that. Can't have that on your record and look to become a wise guy. And the Genovese family let this guy run around in a bathrobe and pajamas. Maybe they needed a front man. I don't know. And like I said, I'm not here disrespecting the Genovese family because as you all think that it's done and it's over, believe me, it's not. And that's still a powerhouse family. Stay up.